welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B, and back for a full show after the holiday, so I hope everyone had a great holiday, and thanks for your support. Still had great download numbers, so go to our website, southboundsports.com. Make sure you subscribe and tell your friends about the show. We got playoffs coming up, so it's a big time of the year for both the NFL and pretty much the end of college football. As we get into the off season, but to kick things off, first I have the Green Bay Packers, Matt, clinching the number 1 seed in the NFC. How do you think that affects Tom Brady, my man, going for a repeat?
I don't think that affects him as much as watching Antonio Brown have another meltdown.
I know, I was hoping you'd bring that up because that's my next talking point. Can you believe that he ripped his uniform off and was jumping jacks or whatever the hell he was doing in the end zone?
Yes. Although to be more honest, I can't believe that security didn't just take him down.
They're not going to tackle him. Could you imagine the public feud he would have if security tackled him?
But it's I think from a mental health standpoint, you could say he was a liability to himself, and we needed to make sure that he was going to be safe to not only himself but the other people in the stadium. So I think there could have potentially been there are a lot of people throwing jokes about the CTE and things like that. I mean, he's had sporadic behavior throughout his career.
Man, I'm pretty sure he has something.
It's legit. There's legitimately an issue, and I think that would have been the perfect opportunity to just have security take him down, get him to an institution, get him an evaluation. And
I'll say this: immediately when it happened, a bunch of hack blogs started taking down my man T.O. and comparing Antonio Brown's antics to T.O.
Not even close.
T.O. was a calculated. He was doing it for media success, and he was very successful. That was pre-social media, pretty much, when T.O. was doing it, and everybody knew his name. He was self-promoting. The NFL hated it. Antonio Brown's not doing it for self-promotion. You don't get yourself kicked out of the league how many times? That's honestly the only reason people know who he is because of football. I know he was on, was that the dancing mask thing that he did? He did some TV stuff, but he never would have gotten that invite if he had quit the NFL 6 years ago, no one would know. He's not a household name. And honestly, if you go by stats, does he have a big legacy in the NFL? I mean, not compared to the other guys T.O., since people keep comparing him to him, and even Ocho Cinco, the star wide receivers, not even close. Maybe I know he had some stats, but his longevity and just not playing. To me, I wouldn't even put him anywhere near the Hall of Fame or anything. And the NFL seems to be, there were still some teams that might be interested in him, and I'm why? It's unbelievable to me. Because on one hand, you have Le'Veon Bell, who seemed to learn from his mistake. He's kept his nose clean pretty much for the past couple of years, right? After his debacle in Pittsburgh. And now, Antonio Brown keeps getting chance after chance. That has to drive Le'Veon Bell nuts. I don't understand how it couldn't. Where he's watching him and he's good Lord, what do I have to do to get a fair shake, And maybe the talent, maybe he is washed up. Running backs don't last as long. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a much tougher road because Antonio Brown's out. You also lost Godwin. Evans is banged up. Tom Brady's doing his, what was that year with the Patriots where they had no receivers anybody knew? It's half the years he was there. And Belichick's we don't need weapons. I'll just throw you out there with some random dudes. And people won't remember their names. And then an Edelman comes out of some nowhere. And it turns out he was on PEDs. People are oh yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense because no one had ever heard of him. So, I don't know. But I think the Packers are in a good spot. I like their chances. And Aaron Rodgers seems to be playing with an edge. I want that to continue because last year, I said on the show, the reason they lost in the playoffs, I think, did they play the Bucs? Is that who they lost to? I can't remember. I think it was, wasn't it?
I want to say, yeah.
Was it the championship game? I don't think it was at home. I'm going to have to look it up. Maybe it was in Green Bay. Because that's the one thing where they had a chance to go down and score, but he was hesitant, didn't run for it. Remember? They had a clear chance, could have had the touchdown. And that was pretty much the end of the year. And I thought, well, that's going to cause a lot of strife. They're also trying, did you watch the game? What was it? I think it was the Packers game. Did you watch it this week?
I watched part of it.
They were talking about him coming back, and it made it think like, all right, maybe they know something. And it was the NFC Championship game last year in Green Bay. They had an identical record. To be honest, I know they're going to have an extra game this year. So I guess they did it last year. I just think without the weapons this year on the team, Tom Brady has to have a lesser chance. And like I said, it looks like Aaron Rodgers is playing with fire. He said that he's worked out some stuff. And it seems like Devontae Adams is going to stay there, too. I don't know what his contract deal is, but I think if it does, you're looking at a parallel to where we were with Big Ben, which is my first big topic of the week, where if Rodgers stays, I think he's going to stay for the rest of his career, however long that is. I know he's been on podcasts talking about retirement in a few years, so maybe he only has a couple years left. Ben stayed. The Steelers stuck with him. Do you think they stuck with him too long?
No, I don't think that they did. I think the guys that they've tried to draft to fill that void just haven't fit the bill. Like, I think they tried to draft Dobbs. He hasn't panned out. They have Rudolph, and to this point, he hasn't shown that he can do it. They had Landry Jones that they couldn't do it. So, I mean, like, they've taken swings at it, but it's just to find a quarterback like Roethlisberger. I mean, he's a once a generation quarterback. So I think part of the thing is that you have to have all these other things line up from an organizational standpoint to make that work. And I think you're seeing that because every year you have these teams at the bottom of the league drafting quarterbacks relatively high, forcing them into bad situations, and then being surprised when it doesn't pan out. I mean, when you remember when Pittsburgh drafted Roethlisberger, their defense was already playing great. They had a really strong defense. They had a strong run game. They had all the pieces in place that all it was early in Ben's career was just don't turn the ball over. Just don't lose the game for us. And as he matured as a veteran, they molded the offense around him. You know, I think they're going forward. They have some aspects of the team that are still intact. I mean, you look at where we're at. Tomlin's still going to have maintained his record of not having a losing record. Like, there's something to be said about that.
And to be honest, he did that with Ben getting injured a few years. But I think, because I just brought it up because I heard a lot of people talking about it, and people were asking me if I thought Ben stayed too long. But in honesty, he stayed the perfect length if he does retire this year. Last year, they were undefeated till whatever week that was. And so you have to give him one more year after that, right? You can't be like, hey, you were almost undefeated. We really need you to go somewhere else. Because that would be idiotic. That'd be dumb. Look at Phillip Rivers last year. They were even talking about bringing Phillip Rivers back this year. They reached out to him. And can you imagine if you're Sam Ellinger, where you're like, hey, you're the guy, but first off, we got to see what our man Phillip Rivers is doing. He was here for that 1 year, and he was pretty good. Like,
well, I think, like, what if Ben doesn't retire? Like, he's saying he's done, but Brett Favre said he was done like 19 times.
Well, I guess he did play into his 40s or whatever. But
Brady's showing that he can play when you're really old. So he could just be like, yeah, I changed my mind. We were pretty close. I think one more year we can do it. One more year we can do it.
I mean, I maybe in the offseason he kind of feels that way, but I think you're really seeing the physical toll on him. I don't remember Brett Favre taking that many hits. Like, I knew he did, and that he probably had concussion stuff. He probably has CTE too. But what Ben has, it's like totally different, where I think it's not more of like a mental hurdle with him. Like, can I do it again? Because Favre only had one Super Bowl, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he was probably always like, that was probably always gnawing at him. Because I think you saw it with Peyton Manning where everyone was like, yeah, remember when you won that one? Lucky. And then he was probably like, pissed off, like, you know what, I'm going to keep playing and win, what he win, 2 of them?
Yeah.
So, all right, perfect, man. Favre, I think, was always chasing that. Ben already has 2, and he played in a 3rd. So he had that on top. I mean, two made Elway quit, if you remember. He never really tried to come back. But I think Ben's at the point where it's like every year you start to fall apart in December. They added an extra game. What would make you think, like, this year's going to be better? I think, honestly, Ben has a better shot at not playing all year and getting the Phillip Rivers call where it's like, hey, we're in the playoffs right now. We kind of need you, or we need one game away, where he's like coming in and he's week 1 Ben Roethlisberger, and he just rides the playoffs. I think that would be a better chance for him. You're laughing, but Phillip Rivers had the call. He was on vacation, they said. That's 5 days ago. I don't think, did he even go to the game? I don't know if he ended up, I never followed up to see if anything happened with that or not. But that would be like the ultimate call where you're Ben and you're like, you know what, I probably could have played one more year, and you're sitting at home and you're working out or whatever because you still have that itch because you're 1 year retired. Give it 10 years and you'll quit. And you'll look like, who was that one football player? We went out over the holidays and he was on TV and I didn't even recognize him. I was like, good Lord, what did you do, man? That was like 10 years. 10 years you fell apart. It was like a running back. He looked like a lineman. But for Ben, stay in shape. They might call you. You're perfect through the first 6-7 weeks, at least when you're healthy, and then you start getting the pressure. Now maybe they'll get in the playoffs and he can make a run, but I mean the drops, man. Could you quit dropping the ball? What are you doing?
No, you know Ben's, like, they kept zooming in on Ben's face, and you know what it looked like after every pass. It just looked like someone that's just pissed off that they're expecting people to be in places and they're not running the right routes. Like, I can tell a frustrated person when you're like, this is so wide open and you just screw this up. And like that's the look that he has all the time. It's just like he's expecting people to be in a different place. It's like, here's where the wide open spot is, but you're just gonna stand over here and dance instead.
Maybe they'll do the wife swap because it's like the Aaron Rodgers thing from interest in Pittsburgh or whatever. Maybe he'll come there and Ben will be like, psych, and he'll just go to the Packers for 1 year. And then he has like Devontae Adams. Could you imagine? Where he's like, you know what? Instead of taking this in, I'm just gonna throw the ball up, baby. We're wide open again. Can you believe it? They don't even cover you. Like, I was watching the game. He's just like wide open. And anytime Aaron Rodgers was in trouble, he just threw it up to him and wide open. I'm like, did they not cover him? What are they doing? Like, he's the number 1 guy. So, then when he come out, Love came in and they were like, oh, look at that technique, just like Aaron Rodgers. And I was like, we're going to have another 5 years of this where they compare him to Aaron Rodgers, just like they always compared Aaron Rodgers to Favre. Remember that?
Yep.
They're like, watch this throw, just like something Brett Favre would do, which has to be annoying as shit, right? Where you're like doing your own thing. And he's like, I remember whenever Aaron Rodgers threw one kind of sidearm like that. And Love's like, oh, good grief. Let me go do something else. But, I mean, I think Pittsburgh's in a good spot. I don't think their defense is as dominant as what people say. Maybe that's just me expecting more. But like, Baker Mayfield is a broken man, right? He just quit because he went to finally get surgery. He should have did that 6 weeks ago. Or hell, even if he was like, once they were eliminated from the playoffs, because he didn't have to play against Pittsburgh, he should have shut it down. He's looked awful since he got injured early in the year. Because like, he was okay. And remember, going all the way back to August, he was like 5th in fantasy points last year. So he was a highly productive quarterback. He got hurt. Like, the first couple weeks, he was all right this year. Wasn't throwing up awesome numbers, but you know, as soon as he got hurt, I had to drop him. So like, it's like, all right, get out of here, Baker. And they're like just throwing him out there. It's like, this is a broken man. I think he's done now. I don't think he'll rebound. I think they broke him this year. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm not talking about
already...
the Steelers breaking them. I'm talking about the Browns did their thing, and they broke them by playing him hurt with players that on offense that kind of just didn't really help to bail him out, like OBJ leaving and Landry. Now it looks like Peoples-Jones and him had a little thing going at the end, so maybe he'll start to like show some of his talent that everyone's been waiting to see. He's shown flashes, but then there's some couple drops where it's like, come on, Peoples-Jones, what are you doing? And just running the wrong routes, like you said, Ben sees all the time. But Baker, man, I don't know if he bounces back from this year.
I mean, I can see from a managerial perspective of why you'd hedge yourselves and look at quarterbacks, but I think if they draft a quarterback early in the draft, I think it just completely, like, it would be a total Cleveland move and something that would just cause more dysfunction in the organization.
Well, don't draft a quarterback. They're not in a position to draft a quarterback. All these teams that lose so much that you're getting a quarterback, I honestly, I've been saying this for years, it's a bad approach to take. Build your team first, have a guy fall to you. Like where the Chiefs got Mahomes is right around where the Steelers got Roethlisberger. Aaron Rodgers, taken late. Tom Brady, very late. They weren't even looking for him because they were in that Super Bowl a few years prior. So you have a couple of other things where it's like, all right, we're going to get our guy. I mean, look at the Titans. They ended up with Tannehill. Didn't they just trade for him? Wasn't he with like the Dolphins or something?
Yeah.
So he's come out of nowhere. Realistically, if I'm looking at the playoff teams right now, only two from the AFC, the Bengals and the Bills, right? They drafted their guys after having losing years, correct? On the NFC side, it would be what? The Cardinals and the Cowboys? Right?
Sounds right.
So 4 of the 14 teams tanked and got a quarterback. The rest of them didn't. They just got guys randomly from other teams through trades, like the Rams fighting Green Bay for that top spot. They picked up a quarterback from the Lions that almost could have been broken years ago. So the Lions tanked, got him. The Rams were like, you know what? I wonder if he could take us over the top. Boom. In the play, I know they were close before with their other guy, Goff. Did they draft him high? I can't remember how high he went.
He was high.
But like all the other teams, you're doing bad. Eagles, how many quarterbacks are you going to draft? Eliminated. I know they had a better year than people expected. And their field, like, was that their field where the railing just fell off?
No, it was Washington because their broadcasters wouldn't even go to the game because they're like, that field's a dump. I'm not going.
Yeah, exactly. So Washington, one of the other ones where it's like, all right, what are you doing? We can just bring them up because they're on my board today. The Washington Admirals, they came out and Washington teased their like next name. And they're like, hey, guys, just so you know, we know everyone wanted it to be the Red Wolves, but because I think it was like Arkansas State or someone else, like the college already had it locked up, they're like, we don't want to have to deal with the trademark dispute for a football team also named that, which is like very similar to what NC State has like Wolfpack. I think it's all one word, where Nevada has it Wolf Space Pack. So like, I'm sure Michigan has like Wolverines locked down. So it's not like you're ever going to see another team like that. They said they also had trouble with just using Wolves, which I don't know. Would that be like maybe the Timberwolves? But I mean, there are same theme names across different sports. So I couldn't think of a team just named the Wolves in football anyway. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they had to have it red because they didn't want to change their colors. And that's like some mind game that they played where they're like, we have to put red there because otherwise people won't associate us with them. Redskins, Red Wolves, get it? But and they bought the domain for the WashingtonAdmirals.com, redirected it to their own website. People caught on, so then they changed it to a food pantry, I think. I'm like, all right, are you kidding me? It's the same exact thing that the Cleveland Guardians did, which I think I put that up. That's their name, right?
Yes.
Cleveland Guardians, which I hate. Because to me, that's such a generic name. If it's something that would have been out of the USFL, Don't name your team that. Like, what are you doing? That's why.
It was the XFL.
Was it?
Yeah.
Who's the other one? The Generals? Is that from the USFL?
Yeah.
'Cause that's
that was New Jersey.
That was like one of their names, right? So the Admirals is kind of like that. And they kind of had like the V shape, which I like is kind of like a boat, or maybe like the A and Admiral. I don't know. In their little teaser, they're doing it on Groundhog's Day. So if it came out and it was just the Washington football team, which I had in my notes anyway to talk about because I played some Madden over the holiday, and the football team is so confusing to use because it'll be like, select your favorite team, football team. I'm like, what the hell? What is this that they want me to pick? And instead, everyone else had their mascot name, but it was, instead of having like the Redskins or even just like Washington football team, writing it all out, it just said football team for everything. So like, it'd be like my team, football team. It's like my team, the Packers or whatever, or the Steelers. It's like, that makes no sense. And for them to keep it, I know that they'd have to do something. I like how like normally soccer uses like FC or some abbreviation. I'm surprised they didn't even do that. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Admirals, unless now they panic because they have a month to change it, right? I don't think anything's set in stone. So they saw the leak come out. Everyone knows what it's going to be. So then they're like, no, that was wrong news. We're actually going to be this. Because I think the Washington Commanders, I was trying to look at some of the different URLs because they made a very strong point where they're like, we want to own everything. I don't think they're going to get admirals.com. Maybe they will. Because like I think a lot of the other NFL teams had their URL names like from way back in like the 90s, of course. This would probably be like some Admirals Club or something. Give me something weird. Actually, it is just some marketing company that I've never heard of. So interesting. I'm surprised they couldn't buy them out. But we'll see. What do you think of the name if that is it?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's tough to have. If that's the name, I don't think anyone will have any arguments with it. So they can go on being a professional team. I think they should have just out of spite just kept football team.
No, they should have went with the pigskins. It's funnier. I know it's not like intimidating, but like, are some of these other ones intimidating? Like the Cardinals? Like, who's going to be scared by Cardinals? And like, I think that was based off what, the baseball team, really?
The Pirates would be. In October.
Available?
No, they would be scared of the Cardinals in October.
Oh, joke's on you. Pirates would never get to October, Matt.
They did once. It was Bucktober. They got knocked out by the Cardinals.
No, Sid Bream, baby. My Atlanta Braves. Don't you remember that? They always interview him. Bring you back the glory days. Which I found, some of my baseball cards. I found my Barry Bonds cards from like years ago. Because I was going through some stuff over the holidays and I was like, man, Barry Bonds, I used to love him so much. And if the Pirates would have kept him and like kind of reestablished himself, because I was going to bring up this parallel later in the show, with the NIL era in college football, but people are complaining that like college football is going to start being a free for all where teams are just going to throw tons of money at people. Teams aren't going to afford that. It's just going to be like Major League Baseball where some colleges are going to be fine being second rate. Like the Pirates, since you brought them up, they're just going to be fine making their money at the gate. And, hey, we're doing this. We're bringing guys in. And they'll use like the ruse of like, hey, they're earning their scholarship. So, you know, they're getting what they're worth. And they'll go 3-9 or whatever. They'll play in some bowl game until Bulls get rid of. Then they won't like have anything to fight for. It'll be like, hey, you know, if only a couple more fumbles didn't happen, we would have been right there. And then if you're a fan of a college football team, you just hope that that's not your team. Although people don't mind. People don't mind, Matt. Look at the Pirates fans. They still show up opening day. If you're a fan of like a team that doesn't want to achieve, because like the Pitt Panthers just won their division and the conference. So I would think that they would be one that maybe they can get some money thrown around. where they can bring back the glory days. But there are some other schools like Syracuse in football where it's been how many years since they've been good? 50, 60? I mean, you could say, what was it, McNabb? Which quarterback was there? Like, maybe you can bring back some of that glory days, but like if you're a fan of them and you're seeing all this money being thrown around, you can't be happy. You just can't be happy. That's why I don't understand some fans. But you never know, Matt. You never know with some of these teams. Because like if you're a fan of the Redskins, they changed the name of the football teams. The stadium is garbage and the team is garbage. Why would you watch or go to the games? Because they changed their name? Is that a distraction? I honestly don't know. Lions fans are kind of the same. I meet a lot of them. Just being around Michigan fans, it's like, oh man, like I feel really bad for you. 2 superstars quit on your franchise. Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson were both like, we can't take it. We're going to honestly give up. Stafford should have gave up, but he went to the Rams, and now he's going to be the lucky one that got out. So if he wins the Super Bowl, I'd be happy for him. But I don't know. Do you have anything else for the NFL stuff? I know I've been rambling on today.
No.
I know. I was trying to think. I had some other things. Oh, kicking back to my baseball cards thing. Because everyone always talks about how baseball cards are like, hey, yeah, you get some baseball cards when you're a kid. Like, these are going to be collectibles, Matt. You know, I went through my cards. I'm like, you know what? I have a whole stack of these. I'm just going to start plugging them in to see what their values are. My most expensive card was worth like $2. And so I realized the baseball card scam. It's just to get kids to buy like a cheap present for someone like you don't really know what they like. So you're like, yeah, these cards are 99 cents. I'll get them a pack of cards. You get the surprise of opening it. But then the ruse is a bunch of old people tell you these cards are going to be worth something someday. Because remember that Babe Ruth one that went, or Honus Wagner or whatever? It never happens. All the cards that sell for like semi-decent money or to at least make your money back are all signed. So that's why people go get their card signed. And if they're signed, then you have like some chance. Other than that, they're pretty much just garbage at this point. So something that I learned over the holidays that I'm like, why do I have these?
Well, see, the thing that you learned is that you need to just go get a bunch of cards, put them in a really good protective case where you're not like eating macaroni and cheese all over them. And then you just leave them in the attic so that when your kids find them, they're like, hey, there's all these nice cards.
That's what I was doing. I had them in the binder, still covered in dust, in a box that somehow the lid got broken. So there's like a film of stuff on it. It's like, what even is this? I found like 3 ladybugs in the case. So who knows what the hell they were doing in there, how they even got in there. And then you have just a deck of cards where it's like, I took time to put these in this binder at one time. I had them organized alphabetically by team. So like the Braves, I had first because those are my guys. I had my man Kenny Lofton at the top, and I also had Barry Bonds in there, even though he wasn't a Brave. And then like I had a bunch of other like guys. That was my first page. After that, it was all like alphabetical by team. I'm like, man, I really put some thought into it. Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, going back through those old guys. But I'm like, I saw them at the store, and I'm like, they still sell them, so people are still buying this. And there's really no value, which playing Madden, it was the same thing. The first 5 minutes of the game was them having you open fake trading cards. I couldn't even play a game. They wanted me to replay Super Bowl whatever, the Chiefs first to Buccaneers maybe? I don't even know who the hell it was. I guess it was the Buccaneers. Was that last year's Super Bowl? Unbelievable. Yeah. Why would anyone want to sit there, fire up Madden? Remember when you used to just turn it on and you could get right into a football game in 10 seconds? Now it's like 15 minutes of me trying to open fake cards and seeing them rate Bo Jackson as like an 85. I'm like, who the hell rated him that? Too low. Too low, baby. They even had Peyton Manning as like an 86. I'm like, get out of here. Why are you making me open these? That's my rant. My random rant for the middle of the show. You have anything random from the holidays?
Was just here's my random one. The Duke's Mayo Bowl. There is not a way in hell that I could sit there smiling while they dump mayo on me.
Not
I would
even
have to wear
dumped mayo. I hate mayo.
I do too, which would make it just 1,000 times worse.
But what the hell is up with that bowl? Every commentator where they had to eat like mayo sandwiches during the game.
I would throw up.
I'm like, why am I watching this? First off, because I said I was going to bring it up as my final bell. So glad you brought it up now. Maybe I'll try to think of something else. But the game itself, I've never seen a game like could you imagine what was the PlayStation one? Is it like the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl or something like that? It would be like if while the guys are playing the game, they had just random players on the side playing PlayStation. That's how it was with the Mayo Bowl. They were so over top with it. Like, they're going to dump a guy with mayo. They're going to do that. They mentioned it every 2 minutes in the game. And I'm like, I'm going to turn the game off because I don't care about the mayo. What was the show on Nickelodeon where they gagged people? I couldn't even think of it. And I didn't even care to look it up because I'm like, they're just trying to bring that nostalgic feeling back. Because even Randy Moss said it on the Monday Night Football. They showed it as a highlight before the game last night, the Steelers game. And Randy Moss said about Nickelodeon. I was like, oh my gosh. The marketing's worked on Randy Moss. That's all I have to say. He thought the same exact thing I thought. And I hated it. I turned it off, to be honest. And then I still saw it. Because they said the mayo dumping was going to be on ESPN News or something. So I flipped to the next game. Nope. They just cut right to it just because they wanted everyone to see it. So I don't know how much they paid ESPN, but money well spent by them because it was everywhere. Do you have any other thoughts on it? I might have cut you off.
No.
But could you imagine if you're there, you're calling the game. They're like, hey, coach, we want you to come in and give your insights on the game. Oh, by the way, you have to eat a mayo sandwich. I'd be like, get the hell out of here. I'm not eating a mayo sandwich. The guy from Notre Dame, I don't know which one it was, but he was like, you could tell he didn't like it. And I'm like, right there with you, brother. And they were like, this is good, right? And he's like, mm-hmm. It looked like he was going to throw up and he was like definitely sick from it. And I'm like, why is ESPN not cutting here? This is bad marketing. He's going to throw up on TV. But he never did. Then they eventually cut it. And I don't even know what they gave. It was like a hoagie or something. So
I just thought like, I would definitely need like multiple masks just to make sure that none of the mayo got in my mouth and my nose.
And I complained about the marketing and its work because we just talked about it for 5 minutes on our show. Totally unrelated. We didn't get any Duke's mayo gear. I wouldn't want the mayo. Give me like a shirt or something that I probably wouldn't wear. But you could be like, I'm keeping that because it's free. That works. Let's see what else. Oh, you want to talk about a little bit about the coaching carousel? Because I've been talking about it. The playoffs aren't really set. So we're going to have coaches that are going to come out next week other than Urban Meyer. He's now available for any coaches. But I talked about Ryan Day potentially to the Bears. Our old buddy Bruce Feldman says that the NFL is interested in Jim Harbaugh again. And he heard from a source in Michigan that it might be mutual. And I told Matt before the show, like, this is the same guy. I think every year he writes an article about Harbaugh going to the NFL. So I tried to look it up by year. The only one I found that I could find that wasn't from today, because everyone took his reporting, copied the same exact story. December 19th, 2014, or December 18th, 2014. Jim Harbaugh, what'd he say? I was told by sources that the reports of Michigan offering Jim Harbaugh are not accurate. Blah, blah. And he said, what did he say at the end? So then Feldman goes on to say, I had it. I should have highlighted it. He said something that he prefers at the NFL. And it's like, how would he know? He didn't talk to Harbaugh. I don't see it on here. I swear it was part of this article. But Feldman, I'm telling you, writes articles every year. I don't know if he's like writing them from the Oklahoma perspective, because he's more of like a Big 12 guy, I think. And he's even tweeted and attacked our podcast before because I made fun of them when they did their branding a few years ago about the one true champion. Remember that? which is probably around the same time, probably about the Harbaugh thing. But he was talking about how Oklahoma was the one true champion. I'm like, they didn't play the championship game, and they lost to the team. I think one of the ones that they were tied with, there was like a weird 3-way tie or something a few years ago. And very similar to like the Baylor TCU year. So then he started tweeting at our show, got us a lot of downloads, so I didn't really mind it. But I'm like, what's this guy doing? He's just reporting random rumors. But I wonder if the NFL is really putting that feeler out there. Because it's not like the Raiders have an opening, right?
Well, they have the interim coach right now,
leading them possibly to the playoffs. They have to win. We didn't even go through the playoff scenario for the Steelers. Packers pretty much clinched up. I think the NFC is pretty much set. You have the 49ers and the Saints that are still alive. The 49ers are up, so I think the 49ers would have to lose. The Saints would have to win, and they would get that last spot. I guess the Eagles are actually in. I don't know why they have them X'd out on here. So the Eagles did make it. Damn it. I hate the Eagles. I guess I should pay attention to them more. All I knew was that the railing fell on them, and Hurts wasn't really hurt. So, I guess, yeah, that's the last spot then for there. So in the AFC, the Raiders and Chargers play. So whoever wins that is in, I believe. If they tie, it gets weird. If the Colts win, they're in. If the Colts lose, I think either Pittsburgh or Baltimore jump either the Chargers or the Raiders loser and the Colts. So the Steelers need the Colts to lose, and then whatever team loses from the Chargers or Raiders. So the Raiders have to win. They're in the playoffs. I don't know. Like at that point. Like how much do you look for a new coach while your team is going on? If they end up winning and going to like the AFC Championship, do you not just ride with that guy? I don't know.
I think if there's any kind of mutual interest, I think that for as much as I've given you a hard time about Harbaugh, I think it's an ideal landing spot for him, because when you look at how Gruden has kind of developed the Raiders, it matches exactly what Harbaugh wants to do with his scheme. Like, Carr's mobile enough that he can still operate some of the zone read stuff similar to Alex Smith. He has a sound running game with Jacobs and Drake. Like, they have the offensive line built. It just kind of matches with what he's looking for.
I'm just saying that if he were to go, I wouldn't be surprised. He said before that he wants to build Michigan into something. I don't even know if you look at this year, getting into our college stuff here as we get to the playoff stuff. I don't know if you really consider that building something like a legacy there. I mean, he leaves with, I think he has a losing record against Michigan State now by 1. And a 1 win against Ohio State? Like, to me, that just doesn't say, like, you know what, I built myself a legacy here. People will remember him winning the Big Ten one time and then getting killed in the playoffs. Which is really weird because a couple days ago, ESPN was reporting that Harbaugh still doesn't have it. Kirk Herbstreit was like, oh, Michigan season's ruined now. It's like, was it ruined when Ohio State gets blown out all the time in their playoff games? Like, what are you talking about? They still won the Big Ten. And then 3 days later, Matt, not even. When was that game? It's the 4th. So I guess 3 or 4 days later, they're completely like, Harbaugh's so great. He's great now. He's going to go right to the NFL. The world's going to be restored. So I don't get why they hate him, but yet they also love him for the NFL. Like, is the NFL leaking it? We know they leak stories because of the Redskins emails, which they covered up, by the way. Although I guess I'm not supposed to say anything bad about the NFL, but we'll see what happens. I don't know what he's going to do. I just don't think at this point, from everything he said in the past, that he's going to leave this year. Is that Raiders gig going to be available in 2 years? Who knows? Every couple of years, the Bears are trying to hire him. Someone even said it's the same team that they hear about all the time. The Bears and possibly the Colts. I don't think the Colts are going to hire him this year because they're 1 game away from the playoffs, but who knows? So, like, if you're Harbaugh and every single year the same teams are available and wanting to hire you, why would you leave this year? You know? Well, like you said, maybe the Raiders are close enough, but it's not like he's going to a team that's built to win. Like, it's not like he's Bruce Arians where it's like Tom Brady said, he's going to meet up with you, Jim Harbaugh, and you're going to win a Super Bowl this year. Then I think if Tom Brady called Harbaugh and said like, hey, I need you to coach the Bucs next year, and Harbaugh went, I'd be like, oh hell, that's a great deal, Harbaugh. Perfect. Just don't get in his way. Don't F this up. Right? I don't see the same type of feeling with the Raiders. I mean, you're going from a team where, yeah, you have to battle Ohio State, but now you're going to go to a division where you have to battle the Chiefs twice? Doesn't make sense. He could win elsewhere. That's my thoughts on that rumor. If he's really going to the NFL to win, go somewhere else. I mean, look how it worked out with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville. Hell, Harbaugh might even have an easier path in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. He's more of a player's guy than Urban was. Ohio State, their players are all coming out. Their programs falling apart. Did you see that?
No.
So a bunch of their players are on social media just trashing the team. Like one guy's been saying how Urban Meyer started this culture and all this stuff, and they're just going all out, transferring away from the program. I think they said, how many guys did they have out for the Rose Bowl? I thought it was 9. I think it was 4 on offense, and then they said 5 on defense, but they never named who they were. So I was like, that's pretty many of your guys that just not play. It's not like one guy because they're going to go in the first round, you know. To have 9 of your guys, maybe there's a problem there. But bringing it back, what if Harbaugh and Ryan Day both left the same year? What would that do to the Big Ten? James Franklin would have to be dancing in the snow. If it's snowing or icing, he'd be out there dancing. Hell yeah, baby, I'm back. Mel Tucker, too, they'd be like, oh my God, this is a perfect situation. Ohio State's locker room could be falling apart. We don't really know. Because to be honest, maybe Day's just pushing guys out that didn't buy into the culture. I don't know. Maybe it works out better for him. But that's the one thing where it really seems like those are the only 2 guys in college that NFL teams are interested in, right? Brian Kelly's always mentioned, but he went to LSU. I don't think he'd leave. Could you imagine he did those LSU videos and then he took a job with the Giants or somewhere? Him with a thick Brooklyn accent. Happy to be here. I don't even know what a Brooklyn accent sounds like, but shit, man, that would be the one thing where if you're a college coach, isn't it annoying that the other guys are thought of as being better than you no matter if you beat them or not? Right?
One would think.
No one's mentioning Mel Tucker for the NFL. They're like, yeah, you know what? Never mind. Not good enough. But we'll take Harbaugh back any day. Teams would line up to have him. That's why I think he could just pick his spot. And, I mean, he has the NFL defensive coordinator. Maybe he takes him with him. But specifically for the game, I think the issue, and I don't know if I've been saying this for a while, or it's more along the lines of you have talent and you have preparation. The playoffs have kind of hyper-focused the talent to match a level that wasn't there in the BCS. Because I think with the BCS, you had a couple of teams that were ultra talented, like USC and Auburn the one year, and a couple other years where teams were getting picked over them and they didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. So you had the most talented teams like USC crushing Iowa in the Rose Bowl while other teams played for the national championship. In the 4-team playoff, you're not having that miss. If a more talented team say Georgia is the 4 spot or the 3 spot, whatever the hell they were, if they're coming in, you're giving a talented team a month to prepare and just pull out all kind of tricks and stuff. And they're doing it. I mean, you saw Georgia do it. All kind of trick plays and smoke screens and stuff like that. they weren't running a traditional offense. They were ready to come out there and just do whatever it took to win the game. And I thought at the beginning of the game, Harbaugh went for it on 4th down. And I thought this is a mistake because Georgia, in the first drive, they were running trick plays and stuff. You know they're not going to stop doing that. And once they scored again, I figured it was going to be over. Although Michigan kind of hung around, even though their offense kept stumbling. The defense strung out their drive. They only gave up 30-something points. Georgia was still trying to score, which is baffling to me that they couldn't score more in the second half. I thought that score, it felt more like a 60-point game, right? It felt like an Ohio State loss where it would have ended up being 64 to 17 or something. But it was 34 to 11? So I'm like, all right, playoff game. I did like what I saw out of Michigan's freshmen. I was just surprised after Nick Saban had success pulling his quarterback to put Tua in. I think Harbaugh should have pulled Cade and put in JJ and really started next year's team at halftime and said, look, you're coming back. We need JJ to come in here because JJ moved the ball. I mean, in the second half, Michigan was moving it. They had 3 turnovers in the red zone. I mean, if you don't have them, maybe you get a score, 1 or 2 more scores, and then it's 30 to 20 something. Then you're in the game at the end. Instead, you're throwing picks in the end zone. The one touchdown Georgia had, the defender just stopped running. He was in great position. He might have even intercepted the ball. I don't know if he didn't see it or what happened. If they were taught, hey, if the ball is not thrown, stop in case he cuts back for a scramble drill, and he didn't expect him to throw deep. I don't know. I really don't know, but I don't think it was. I mean, the score could have been way worse just from watching the game.
Yeah.
But I mean, in realistic terms of oh, that was an absolute beatdown. It really wasn't. Just because of whatever reason, Georgia couldn't get it done. They were trying. I think they even mentioned that they had their starting defense still on the field when Michigan scored their touchdown and got the 2-point conversion because they didn't want Michigan to score, which, all right, I get you have to do that because Alabama's probably played their guys the entire time. And then same with Cincinnati. Came out. They weren't as talented as Alabama. It's not in years past where Cincinnati's playing an Alabama team that just missed the playoffs, like when UCF played Auburn that year. Auburn, are they really going to be hyper-focused to win the Orange Bowl or whatever bowl that was? No. Prime for an upset. If that was a playoff game, do you think UCF beats Auburn? Probably not, because Auburn's going to say, hey, we're still alive in this. So, in terms of blowouts, if they keep it at 4, it's not going to stop. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I kind of thought the same thing. I was expecting it to be a lot closer of a game. I thought with the way that Georgia's offense was set up, I thought it was going to be more of a smash mouth battle. I didn't think that Georgia was going to come out the way they did.
I mean, they came out, to be honest, it was almost like they just took Iowa's game plan. If you watch the Big Ten championship game. So there must have been something that they saw. And remember, Michigan's defensive coordinator, this is his first year as defensive coordinator. And he's had a rough year. Early in the year, he had tough time making adjustments. You saw it in the Michigan State loss. He's kind of shored that up. That's why even though Michigan won so big in the Ohio State game, I kind of felt like they weren't really out of it because they had the long drives that Georgia had. And I mean, Ohio State scored the same amount that Georgia scored around, right? I don't remember what that final score was. Maybe they were only in the 20s. Ohio State scored 24, maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to look it up. But I will say that the game that Michigan was expecting them to play is kind of like what you were expecting them to play, and they didn't play it. So kudos to their coaching staff for coming out and seeing something on offense and saying hey, we're not going to fall behind. And now if you're Alabama, you have to be ready for both, right? You can't
I would
just
think, yeah.
be in. And I almost wonder, so Michigan's defense is kind of built just like Clemson's defense. And you saw Georgia struggle with it. I think they had a different quarterback in week 1, right? Stetson didn't play. the beginning week. I think it was JT Daniels, right? So
Yes.
they went to that running style where you have a killer D line and a pass rush, just like Clemson. I mean, Michigan had a guy in the Heisman finalist as defensive pass rusher. They didn't even give him a chance because everything was 2 seconds. They were throwing a screen. They were throwing it out. They were just moving the ball around. And I think it was a perfect plan to neutralize that pass rush. And if they do that against Clemson, they probably blow them out too. So I wonder how much of that is going to be used against Alabama, because you really didn't see any of that in the SEC championship game either. So I don't know, but I get the same feeling for Georgia, where I've seen Michigan in prior years kill Penn State or kill Notre Dame. And I say, this is it. This is it. Michigan's going to kill Ohio State. And they get up to them and they just wilt. And it's like, oh, well, never mind. I feel like that's going to be the championship game again, right? You saw them because, like, what was it? Was it Shea Patterson's year? The last year Michigan played Notre Dame? Absolutely hammered them. 45 to like 10 or something. Notre Dame had all kind of excuses where it was like wet out. It was cold up there. They couldn't really handle it. But that was a Notre Dame team that was just in the playoffs. So, like, they were a good team. They were talented. That's the kind of vibe I got from Georgia playing Michigan, where everyone's always like, hey, you know what? They brought their best game plan, kind of brought it early, you know? And now Alabama has a week or a week and a half or whatever it is to get ready for it. I don't know. What's your prediction for that championship game?
I want to say, I mean, it's tough to me, I think it's tough to beat the same team multiple times. So I'm kind of siding with the fact that I think Georgia has a shot. And just because of how Bama manhandled them early, I think that you're gonna see a different Georgia team come out, and I think that they're gonna be more competitive this time around. I mean, Vegas has to know something we don't, because after watching the SEC championship game, they're still declaring Georgia as the favorite. So I think there has to be something to that.
Well, I think that Georgia has the most talent on paper. And I think that they're just sticking with that and how dominant they were all year. Where realistically, I mean, people complaining about them getting in the playoffs, everyone has been knowing that they were going to get in because of the narrative from the committee for like the past couple years, where they're like, it's not the most deserving team, it's the most talented team. Even if that team has 2 losses, you know how they always try to put that in there so they can put their favorite teams in? Well, guess what? Oklahoma State really blew it. Be mad at them. Don't be mad at Cincinnati or Notre Dame or Michigan or whatever. Be mad at Oklahoma State. If they win, they're probably in the playoffs. You don't get an SEC rematch. I guarantee that maybe Michigan's the number 1 again, and so they play Cincinnati. Oklahoma State has to play Alabama. Would the results be different? Would Alabama still win the national championship in 2 blowouts? Maybe. But, like, I don't think you're going to get the SEC rematch. Usually I agree with you, where if you play a team twice, you're going to beat them the second time. I just don't think they're going to get over the Alabama issue in the same year. Because it was my fear whenever everyone kept talking about, hey, does Ohio State have a chance to get in the playoffs a couple years ago? Like if Michigan beat them or whatever, or what was the year where if Michigan won, I think it was 2016, where if Spate didn't get hurt against Iowa and Michigan won, they're probably going to be Big Ten champs after losing to Ohio State. And in the playoffs, Ohio State was probably going to get in with them because they got in anyway, I believe, that year. So what happens? They would have had to lose to them twice in the same year. I guarantee Michigan would have lost to them again. I guarantee, even though they went to overtime in the shoe, they would have lost that second time. And that's where I think you let the loss, you lose to them twice. You let that game beat you again. And to be honest, like I saw when JJ was in the game for Michigan, if you watch the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's the freshman quarterback that they put in. Georgia couldn't tackle him. Alabama has a better, more experienced version at their quarterback. that was the difference in the championship game. Unless he gets hurt or something, or like they force him to like fumble or get a couple turnovers, I think you're going to see a repeat. Because when JJ was in, it wasn't like Georgia was really slowing him down. It was kind of like Michigan still messing around with their other quarterback and switching him back in and then throwing an interception or fumbling it. So it's like, what the hell are you doing? And I don't like to like push guys out of the program or whatever, but I think it's very clear if Harbaugh stays, JJ has to be the guy. I don't think if JJ was the quarterback all year, I don't think Michigan wins the Big Ten. I think they needed Cade's steady experience for that. But in the playoffs, you need a dynamic playmaker to win in the playoffs. You've seen it with Clemson. What happens when they have a dynamic Heisman winning quarterback? National champs. When they don't, they get blown out. You need that guy unless you're talented like Georgia is. And they had one against Michigan. So maybe he plays like that against Alabama. But if the other team's outscoring you, which is what I think Alabama's going to do again, I don't think it matters. You have anything else on it?
Well, I think it kind of segues into the next topic, but I think if Georgia doesn't, I think that that it just leaves the college football teams that are going to end up being more competitive within this current playoffs format. I think you're going to see they'll be the ones who are willing to spend the most money on some of those NIL deals. And so it'll just become, how do you compete with an Alabama? You have all these 5-star athletes. Well, you better pony up and start paying for the upgrades that you need.
And I did have that on here so we can get into like the NIL era. And that's what I was saying. If you look at the team composite, right now, I think Georgia and Ohio State were the top two teams, depending on where you looked. Michigan had no trouble with Ohio State. They weren't scheming. Like their scheme played right into Michigan's hands. Like they let their first round left tackle just get bullied by Hutchinson all day. They never adjusted. Like I guarantee Georgia's coaches watched that film, and same with Iowa's coaches. Cause like, let's be honest, Iowa has a hell of a lot of great coaches on their staff. That's how they win with less talent. Ferentz would have been hired by the NFL. He was like the original Harbaugh, where every year it was like, hey, Ferentz he's going to be hired by the Giants. He's going to be hired by the Ravens or wherever. And then it just never really panned out, because he didn't want to go. He's like, I kind of like it here. It's easy. I can just let my coaching staff do whatever they want to do. And, they'll cover for me here and I'll just stay here for 17 years or however long he's been. But, they saw how Michigan's pass rush bullied Ohio State, and they said, you know what, we want no part of that. We're just going to try to run screens or whatever. And with talent that's not on Georgia's level, Michigan shut it down. They scored, 3 points, I think, in that championship game? Georgia probably saw that and was like, you know what? We're going to do that, but with 5 stars. And guess what? It worked. They basically just copied their homework, but made it a little bit different. You know how your friend tells you can copy my homework, but just make it different so the teacher doesn't know. That's kind of what Georgia did. We're like, you know what? We're going to put a couple running backs out there instead. Like some of these 5-star guys that we got. And I was like, all right, that works. So let's see if that works. And then it did work. So now watch Ohio State roll that out next year. And so you're just hoping that your coach can adjust and do whatever. Because if you remember, when Don Brown got figured out at Michigan, he was done. I think they kept him for a year too long because you saw what happened last year. Once Ohio State unlocked that key and showed everyone that you can just run slants underneath his blitzes, everyone started doing it, and his defense really struggled. Like when Rutgers is taking you to overtime because their offense is just plowing through your defense, you have issues. And that's not a knock on Rutgers or whatever. They played a hell of a game against Wake Forest for a while. Even though they were way underdogs, big underdogs in that game. But for the NILs, now there's rumors that teams are paying $30 million, not teams, but, boosters. They're putting together $30 million endorsement deals that are multi-year, where they're saying like, hey, come to us. We're going to have you in And like, let's be honest, they're businesses that are local. We're going to have you in commercials for like the local furniture store for like 9 months. You do one every semester. You come in, we do it, we run it, we pay you like 10 grand or whatever it is. And they do that for every player on the team. And guess what? 25 guys coming in, you sign those deals, boom, lock up the number one recruiting class by far. I think A&M has the number one recruiting class ever. And people were saying like, oh, that Jimbo never recruited like that. To be honest, he did recruit top 5 classes while at Florida State. So he's always been a good recruiter, but he's not this good. So, like, if there's smoke, there's usually fire, right?
But you know what? I give Jimbo credit. And it was one of the reasons why.
I'm not calling him out either. So
I was really upset whenever he left for A&M, is because I knew the fact that he kind of saw where things were going. Like he was ahead of the curve, trying to push Florida State's administration into upgrading the facilities. And like everyone always thought, oh, he's making a really big deal out of these upgrades. But you see, as soon as he went to A&M, he was upgrading facilities. You have all these like Alabamas, and even Clemson had upgraded their facilities during their national championship run recently. That it was like that was the hot commodity, is what are the extra perks that you can provide for your student athletes to attract them to your school. And then from there, it's now become these NIL deals of how do you set these people up, and are you doing them in a certain way? And I think what you're seeing now is you're starting to see more where you had these players that in the past you might have had boosters or people secretly trying to pay for athletes, but it was like, how do you get, like, there was no guarantee on that investment. Like if you were trying to give a player a car, you couldn't just be like, hey, give me that car back. Like, because it was like
you could do that.
But you know, like the joke was like with Eric Dickerson when he went to SMU, they had like the transaction where he suddenly had this new car, but then at the 11th hour changed his mind, went to SMU. And they're like saying, I think it was either Texas or Oklahoma were rumored to have given it to him. But it was like, there was no way of going back on it. Where I think now with some of these NIL deals, it's like you may commit to. Well,
they can 100% go back on it. We saw it with Ohio State's guy, Quinn Ewers, or however you pronounce his name. Yeah. He made a video of him giving the car back as he left for Texas Tech. Where is he even going? Texas.
But I think, but with some of them, like that could, the school you're starting to see, like I think it was even A&M that was showing how they're structuring their deals at like 1 year thing, so that if a player decides to leave at the end of the year and go to another school, they can pull their deal as well. So they're not, the player isn't tied to the deal, and the sponsor isn't tied to it either.
Well, that's where I see a lot of people that I don't think understand the business side of it, where they're thinking, I saw a lot of comments were like, hey, Texas A&M's locking these kids in. They're going to be prisoners for 4 years. Like, no, like you said, it's going to be smart money. They're not really locking them in. Otherwise, you're going to have contract disputes like we see every day in like the NFL, or even with coaches' buyouts or whatever. If the players are smart, put a buyout in where, like, if they're not playing, you're going to get paid no matter what. And that's what I think we're going to really start to see, where you're going to have a lot of boosters paying all this money. And then guess what? If it doesn't pan out and a class is a bust, because like I can think back to one of Michigan's classes that was highly rated where a bunch of the players ended up transferring. If that class considered a bust, what happens whenever the next year comes around, where the boosters are like, all right, do we want to just keep paying money for these guys to leave after 1 year? Or they're paying and the coaches are just missing. So it's just going to suck, where it's like, all right, these guys suck. Like, do we trust our coaches? Like, we're going to cut our money, and then you're going to see coaches tied to like the boosters, like Texas already is. And look how a mess they are. So it's going to be it's going to be a balance. I think right now you're going to see players just start to get crazy offers. Like, it's rumored that the quarterback from Oklahoma received an offer from Auburn, and everyone's like, no, that's not true. That's not true. The very next day, he enters the transfer portal. So it's like, all right, Is it not true? Because like, why would he enter the portal the very next day? And if it comes out that he signs with Auburn, I'm going to be like, it was true, right?
I think it would be funny if he would have just signed with South Carolina just to spite Radler.
Which would be funny, yeah.
Like, hey, we're buddies, right?
Well, because I mean, like, you could see that offer, and then maybe he's putting that out there as like, hey, I'm in, and then watch him end up at USC or somewhere, where they're like, hey, yeah, we'll get him out here with Lincoln Riley and try to get things moving quicker than what was expected. Because I also think in terms of getting players out, if you remember when Harbaugh started his like campaign, or like what were those camps called he did? The summer tour.
His satellite camps.
All the SEC schools were like, no. They even talked about it during the championship game where Kirby Smart was so mad he attended one with Harbaugh because it was in Georgia. Harbaugh's like, if you're so mad, why don't you just come? And then he ended up coming. Could you imagine how awkward that would be? Like now with like the NILs and stuff. But you got to be forward thinking. Like you need a coach that can do that. And that's why, like, if Harbaugh leaves for the NFL, it will I wonder who Michigan will get, and they have to have a guy just like him. Because since he's been there, he's been pushing the envelope. He got Rashawn Gary kind of on a pre-NIL deal where when he signed with Michigan, I know he started his own sports agency company while he was there, where he was kind of setting up for his NFL career, where he had all the marketing deals in place. I don't know how much it's worked out for him with the Packers or whatever, if that ended up going anywhere. But can you imagine if you're the number one guy and the school says, hey, yeah, we already have this worked out for you, just come sign here. And instead of you getting paid, you're going to be the guy making the money, because I think some of the top guys, you can make it more on the open market. And I think it will take a few years for that to kick in. But that's where you see a lot of the top schools that are more marketable because they have more fans everywhere. And you know, they're like the bigger northern schools where it's like Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame. I think they'll really start to kick in some of these players where like Auburn doesn't have a national draw. Like, let's be honest. So if some of the bigger schools, even like USC out west, if they start pulling in national recruits, I think you'll see a lot of the SEC schools lose that power. Because outside of like the SEC as a brand, it's really just Alabama and friends right now, other than A&M going all crazy until Texas gets in there. But I think the rest of them, like Ole Miss, if you went to a random like person and you had like an Ohio State logo and an Ole Miss logo, you know which one they're going to recognize. They're going to recognize the goddamn Ohio State logo. They're going to know what the hell Ole Miss is. And like, if you're a joker if you think the SEC is just that much more powerful, because I saw like people saying, well, this is going to mean Notre Dame's going to join the SEC now. They're seeing what A&M's doing. They're going to try to just do it. Like, you don't need to do it. You can tell recruits like, hey, we're playing all over the country. Like, you could go to A&M. They're stuck in the SEC now with Texas and Oklahoma joining. You want to take boring trips to play at Missouri all the time? Like, nah, come to Notre Dame. You can go out in LA. We'll play on the East Coast. Maybe we'll schedule a game with like Penn State in New York, you know, because we do weird things like that. Or we'll go to Dublin, play UCF, because that's what every Irish guy wants, is to go see Notre Dame play UCF. I think maybe Penn State was playing UCF. I don't remember which. I think that Notre Dame might have been playing Navy or something. But if those big schools start throwing money around, I think things will start evening out. And let's be honest, Florida State needs to get it together. If Florida State and Miami started to get recruits back out of the state of Florida, I don't think you see the SEC being that dominant anymore. Especially if Clemson can stay around. Because if you look at the ACC, I mean, their bowl season wasn't good. Michigan State should not be taking down the ACC champ. I know they took down the Big Ten champ earlier in the year, but like, they didn't have Kenneth Walker in that game.
Yeah, but Pitt was playing on a third string quarterback too. So I mean, it is what it is. Like that's tough to win with a backup quarterback in this era of opt-outs and transfers, let alone your third string. I mean, there's probably a handful of teams that could truly win with their third string quarterback in place.
And it's not just the ACC. The Pac-12 looked worse. Did they even win a game? I don't think. So it's like, yeah, all right. Now you're putting everything in on on Lincoln Riley.
Well, hell, if you put everything on Alabama and Georgia, the SEC did terrible. They had like almost every team in, but I think Vanderbilt, and they all lost, but Bama and Georgia.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Bama and Georgia have been recruiting like champs. Now A&M's going to be recruiting like champs. So I think Alabama's not going to like that, right? Because why would you? You've been the champ for so long, and then you have them in the division. I've been saying this all along. Don't be surprised when Texas's oil money gets in that West Division if Alabama and Auburn go to the East. When the new divisions are announced, you're going to have Alabama and Georgia because they're going to look at it and say, Georgia can't beat us. I don't care how many recruits they're paying. The East is way easier than what it's going to be when you have A&M, Texas, and LSU paying and saying, you know what? Come play with us. We'll work out $1 million deal for you. Like, we're going to get the best recruiting class of all time. Come on over.
Well, and I think that makes sense too, because if you put them on that same side, you keep them all together, it sets the table for life post Saban.
Well, could you imagine the East with a bad Alabama and Georgia? It'd be like just like now. Georgia gets to the championship game, loses to A&M instead of Alabama. And then it's back. The cycle continues. Because unless Georgia has to win, like you've been recruiting number 1 or top 5 classes for how many years in a row? You have to win. You have to. Like you didn't win the conference. What's the highlight of your year? Beating Michigan? You were touchdown favorites. Like you were supposed to win that game. What are you doing? If you lose, especially double digits again, to Alabama, like you have to say like it's not working. And that's where I start to think like boosters lose interest because at some point they're like, look what we're getting you. How is it better than what Mark Richt was doing? Right?
I agree.
Do you keep Kirby Smart around until Saban retires? Could you imagine 2026? They're like, he can't be coaching anymore. He has to be done for this year. Come on, Kirby. Like, if you don't, I mean, he hasn't beat them, right? No, that's longer than Michigan's streak. I think they haven't beat them since 2008. I'm going to look it up. I know they didn't play every year, but I'm pretty sure we talked about it.
Well, that was what cost Richt his job. I mean, they were winning. They were being consistent. They were competing for SEC championships. And then they're like, nope, not good enough. We need championships like Alabama. And they kind of fell off for a little bit until Kirby got his players in place.
Yeah, Richt beat Saban in 2007, that 1 year. Beat him by a field goal in 2007. That's the last time that Alabama lost to Georgia. And so under Kirby Smart, they've lost by, 3, 7, then 20 something, and then 20 something, almost identical. Last year and this year, it is the identical score, I think. 41-24 last year and this year. And then, so each year it's been getting worse and worse under Kirby Smart. So like if they get killed again by 20, what do you do? Do you say like, it's fine, this is fine?
I guess you have to and just be like, well, it is what it is.
Because like I saw a lot of Georgia fans saying like, if only Auburn would have beat them, then we wouldn't have had 2 SEC teams in the playoffs. But I'm like, yeah, you would have, really. Are they not going to put an SEC champ Alabama in? I mean, I think they would have figured it out to have the same exact playoff. Michigan would have been number 1. Alabama would have been 2. Cincinnati would have been 3, and non-champ Georgia would have been 4. Like, it would have been the exact same playoff. They would have just re-rigged it. You know? They didn't want 2 SEC teams playing in that first round. Plus, would Georgia have really wanted to play them? Right again? Like, could you imagine? That's what everyone was afraid of, that Georgia wouldn't show up against Michigan because they would have been shell-shocked. But like I said, they threw out probably their best game. Their best planned game of the year, I believe. Because a lot of their other games I just thought were kind of uninspired. And you really didn't know how good the SEC was. Like we saw in the bowl season where the SEC didn't look that good. So do you really put them head and shoulders above the other conferences? I don't think so. I think the only thing that fixes it, and this will help balance out the NIL, is if you expand the playoffs, you got to at least go to 12. I would prefer 16 because, like, does Alabama or Georgia need a bye? No. Did Michigan need a bye this year? No. How do you know they deserved it? You know?
Yeah.
I would just like to see them go and say, get rid of that long layoff. If you're tired of blowouts, have a shell-shocked Georgia team play, who knows, Utah? Could you imagine after getting killed by Alabama, you have to play Utah, a team that's going to pound you with their running game like a week or two later? Like, no. In Utah, because they're the Pac-12 champs, like, I think you got to add the home field advantage, too. Because right now, you're giving them a neutral field playing on, like, turf or whatever with teams that have just better talent. Of course they're going to run you out of the building, right?
In theory. I mean, unless you have something special to
No, just in theory. We've seen it for 7 years now. Who's even surprised? Like, how many games weren't blowouts? Because even Florida State got killed by the Ducks, right? I guess you could say that year Ohio State beat Alabama, it was only a touchdown win, I think.
Yeah.
But like all the other ones, like Oklahoma's been killed every year. Are people saying that Oklahoma's had bad years? No. Why would everyone think that Michigan had a bad year? Like they still crushed Ohio State. So let's see. Oh, this doesn't have the score on it. It just tells me the selections. So like, yeah. Okay. So Oregon killed Florida State 59-20. That's what I thought the Georgia game was going to feel like.
But, you know, that Florida State-Oregon game, that was competitive till midway through the third quarter when everything fell apart.
Jameis
like, it was within a score, the wind blew.
So
it was that heavy wind that knocked the ball out of his hand.
So Ohio State beat Alabama by a touchdown that first year. The next year, 2 blowouts, including Michigan State's 38-0 loss to Bama. Then the next year, 2 blowouts. 2017-18 was the first year that was actually close, where Georgia and Oklahoma went to double overtime. The other game was a blowout. The following year, then Alabama played Oklahoma close. They beat them by 11, which is, I don't know how close you consider that. Then Clemson beat Ohio State by 6, which was the targeting year. Remember that? I think that was the targeting year.
Well, they were back to back where Ohio State had one and then Clemson had one the following year.
Yeah, so the next year, Ohio State beat Clemson pretty bad. That was last year. And then this year,
Clemson had.
So, single-digit games, there's been what, 2? Other than that, the next closest is 11 points. Like, it's not just picking the wrong teams, because like the winners are seed 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3. There's a lot of 3s mixed in there and 4s because you don't know who the best team is. You're putting the most talented teams in there as a lower seed just because you're giving them a mulligan. You're saying like, oh, Georgia, you didn't win your championship. We know you're really talented, so we're going to put you in anyway. And they take advantage of the talent. That's basically all there is. So now you just got to hope that your team gets that quarterback. Like, is Michigan going to be able to take JJ and go to the next level? I mean, honestly, only 7, 8. So 13 teams, if I'm counting correctly, have made the playoff. That's it. Do you really think next year? So going into the playoffs next year, if I say, hey, Matt, who do you think is going to be the 4 teams that get in? Would you pick someone that hasn't been in already? Maybe USC, right?
You mean USC or Oregon? I mean, depending on what they.
So they wouldn't be new. Penn State, if Harbaugh and Ryan Day leave, you could say maybe Penn State, maybe USC.
Oklahoma State was right on the doorstep. I mean,
they blew it,
but they could be back.
I think the only way they get in is whenever Oklahoma or Texas leaves. Because, I mean, we've seen the Big 12 get close where I really think the media hates them so much that it's really Oklahoma or Texas or bust.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at the conference, their margin of error is so much smaller. Like, I think when you look at the SEC, you could lose 2, almost 3 games, and they'll still advocate and be like, "Oh no, they're definitely worthy of being a playoff team." But in the same note, if Clemson loses a game, if Florida State loses a game, hell, Pitt's one loss. Like if they would have won out, and just their only loss been the Western Michigan, would have been that's too bad of a loss. Like there's no way we can put you in the playoff.
So
you lost a game. So I mean, like there is a really heavy bias. That margin of error is in there. So you have to win.
Other than like a BYU taking Cincinnati's place and going like undefeated with a tougher schedule, like this year where they had all the Pac-12 teams they beat, I think realistically there might only be 4 teams: USC, Penn State, Auburn, and what was the other? Oh, A&M, because they're recruiting this year, that I could see really getting in. You could argue maybe Miami, because they were hyped up this year. But I honestly don't ever see them winning out. Maybe that's just me. I'm not a big fan of Cristobal. So I'd be shocked if they kind of went that route. But like the rest of the teams, like, no. I think you're going to see some mix of the teams that are in. I'm really hoping that like Michigan can maybe settle if Harbaugh doesn't leave, where it's either them or Ohio State getting in every year. And kind of like the ACC, where maybe Florida State gets back and it's them or Clemson every year instead of just Clemson. But I really think they should expand it. Because I've said it before, and this is my final thought for the final bell. People were texting me, laughing at Michigan's performance. I'm like, dude, I would rather get killed in the playoffs than win any other bowl game. And I'm including the Rose Bowl. I don't give 2 shits about the Rose Bowl. Look, Ohio State won. Awesome. You know how many people really cared about that game? Anyone maybe over the age of 60. Younger guys don't care that they were in the Rose Bowl. Like I've said it on the show before, they just don't care. If you're that hyped on it, it doesn't mean anything. Ohio State beat a 3-loss Utah. I think Utah should have been in the playoffs in an expanded situation because they won their conference. But I don't think they're ever going to do all conference champs. Because like the SEC is going to say like, look, this year, Georgia wasn't a conference champ and they made the championship game. I think did Ohio State win when they weren't conference champs that one year? I don't know if they've been in when they weren't conference champs. So maybe they won a championship. But I think that's a tough sell. If I'm the other smaller conferences, I say go to 16, give every conference an auto bid. And that's what I would be pushing for. If you're going to go to 12 and you're a smaller conference, you're dumb. Like if you're the AD, what are you doing? Like, are you trying to lose money? Because if you let them expand the playoffs to 12, the bowl systems they're dead. They're dead. The smaller conferences are going to be killed. Right? Do you agree?
I would say in some ways, yes. Because if you're putting all of your stock in the playoff, then I think you kind of force some of the better college players to want to participate at that. Like, if there's not anything other than you're getting the perks of being at a bowl and it's taking you away from your Senior Bowl preparation, or your combine preparation, then I think you'll see more players choose to opt out. I mean, on that same token, I think Herb Street and Desmond Howard were talking about how kids don't care about the game as much. Well, I think so much of it has become monetized. Like it becomes a business decision.
Matt, you go to a game and you have to sit through minute commercials while your guys are just standing on the sideline. Get rid of that crap and then tell me the players don't care about the game. Going to a game in person is awful. So you can continue, but I just want to let people know, like if you go to a game and you're standing in the cold, what are you doing? Like you have to be annoyed. I know I've been.
Yeah. So, you have that aspect of it, but then there's also like with if you expand the playoffs, you're going to get more people that are regularly on teams opting in as opposed to opting out of the postseason. If you're playing in a bowl that has no ties to being in the national championship, you're going to continue to see the opt-outs, which I don't necessarily think is good or bad, but I think it's just depending on the person. it's how much of a risk do you take? Like to me, I think Kenny Pickett isn't a lock to be a first round pick. So he opts out. He has enough tape that he can justify being put in that discussion. And I think it showed more that if Pitt didn't play well, he could say, look at how much better they played when I was there. Like, we won the ACC championship with me there. I didn't want to get injured playing in a bowl game that didn't matter. And you're healthy, as opposed to if he has shoulder damage, if he gets rolled up on. And granted, that can happen in a preseason game, or that can happen during a playoff game. But I think at that point, you got to protect your best interest.
So I'm looking at the ratings because I know I've been trashing the Rose Bowl. So the Rose Bowl actually tied the Cotton Bowl in terms of viewers. And so I don't want people sending me this and saying, like, look, the Rose Bowl, it is popular. The Rose Bowl is on regular TV. The playoffs are both on cable, only on ESPN. So people have to pay to watch them. That's where you see the ratings. Put the playoffs on ABC, and the ratings are going to be through the roof. I mean, the most watched game was the Michigan-Georgia game. And the playoff games weren't even really close. People, I think, stuck with the Utah-Ohio State game because they thought Ohio State was going to lose, right? I mean, that game came down to the wire. A lot of the other games didn't. The rest of the bowl games, Matt, Michigan, Ohio State did better numbers. Regular season. And some of the other regular season games. Like, they're drawing 7.6 for the Peach Bowl. Was that Pitt's game? 8 for the PlayStation Bowl. 9.8 for the Sugar Bowl. So none of them broke double digits except for those other 3 I mentioned, the 2 playoffs and the Rose Bowl. ESPN's like talking like they're awesome numbers. The rest of the bowl games, Matt, much lower. Like less than like 1 million for a bunch of them. That's XFL numbers. People tell me the XFL isn't going to last because they get like 1 million viewers. Remember bringing those numbers in a couple years ago when they played? The bowl games, no one cares about them. XFL draws better numbers than some of the bowl games for that first week. So it's like, just get rid of them. Let Liberty or App State, or I don't know which teams ended up good or won their conference this year. Let them play Alabama as the tune-up. Alabama's going to blow out Cincinnati. Let them blow out Louisiana Monroe instead. And who knows, maybe you'll get an upset for the ages. Remember when Virginia lost as a 1 seed to a 16? I mean, that would most likely be Pitt getting in, which would be even more embarrassing, right? They did lose to Western Michigan. Could you imagine if Pitt made the playoffs, went undefeated in the ACC, had lost to Western Michigan, and then lost in their bowl game to like Louisiana Monroe? That would be peak Pitt right there. That
would be a total Pitt move.
So that's my final thought. But we'll be getting more into this. I don't know if you have anything for the final bell. I know we've gone long, so.
No, that's it. We just appreciate the ongoing support, and even over the holiday season, it was awesome to see the great numbers. So we appreciate you tuning in.
Yep. So thanks for listening. We'll get back to you next week. We have the championship game. I still think Alabama's got it. Sounds like Matt thinks Georgia's going to pull it off. But get ready for the playoffs. I hope Steelers make it. Maybe my man Tom Brady can get back to the Super Bowl. I think a Bucs-Packers rematch would be great in the NFC, but we'll get those figured out next week for the show. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.